For those of you who don't know, my name is George Bourque. I am from Massachusetts, and I am part of the OAA. I'm a director to the OAA. One of the committees I'm involved in is the legislative committee, where I'm the chair. And here joining me, we have some guys who are pretty into legislative stuff. First, Kris, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, George. My name is Kris Pickford. I've worked with Optician Association of America for 12 or 13 years on a wide range of issues. As George said, mostly something to do with regulations or legislations. But looking forward to having a chat with everybody. And we could go on to Wes.
Hi, I'm Wes. I'm from Orlando, Florida, and I'm on the board of directors for the Professional Opticians of Florida, and also on the legislative committee for our organization.
All right, and certainly last but not least is Jim Morris.
Well, good morning and afternoon, depending on where you are, everyone. I am Jim Morris. I'm the Executive Director and General Counsel for ABO and NCLE, and we are very actively involved in both OAA and state leadership in making sure to try to protect the state licenses and addressing any issues that involve opticianry. So we're looking forward to talking to everybody about all the legislation and all the issues and what you should do in preparing for those issues. One little housekeeping issue. If you look at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A. If you'll pop your questions into the Q&A, we will try to queue those up and talk about those if we have time and if we can get to each one of those. You can also put them in the chat if you don't know how to get into the Q&A, but we will look forward to talking to everybody about everything. All right, back to you, George.
Awesome. All right, so on the legislative committee, we made this kind of plan that's available to anybody in the state. If you guys want it, you can just email me. My email's right there. Chris's email's right there, and Chris Allen's email's there. So if you'd like a copy of this, we're happy to send it off. And we'll
hey, George.
Yes.
George, your screen's blank, actually.
Oh, was it really? Well, there we go.
All it is whiteboard.
All right, I will fix that. So we have this document that I made that's supposed to be up on the screen, but that's all right. How's that one?
There we go.
There it is.
It went away. No,
Nothing?
It went away.
Weird. All right, well, technical issues, we're going to skip that. So we have this document that you guys want to see. We're happy to share it. And basically what the document is it has who to contact when there's a problem, and then it also has some kind of case studies of what some other states did. And what we figured we'd do today is kind of go through the case studies of what other states have kind of dealt with and how they dealt with it and what they did from a state society level, what we did to support them through OAA and other ways. So first up, we should probably talk about Florida, because Florida was pretty cool. Florida happened about a year ago, and a lot of it took place right around leadership. So Wes, do you want to talk to us, since you're from Florida, about what was going on? It was the Sunset Bill, HB 707.
Yeah, so we had, our governor had what's called a deregathon, and basically wanted to go through all the different professions and decide what parts they were going to sunset, get rid of, add to, take away. Basically every profession in the state was on the chopping block. Everything from medicine, dentistry, nursing, opticianry, everything. So the bills were filed in the House and the Senate, and we got wind of it. We had a lobbyist at the time, but we decided to switch gears and go with a little bit more powerful lobbyist to get a hand on what's going on. So the bills were filed through the House. It was moving along. There was a little objection to some parts, but basically it passed through the committees, and basically we were waiting on the Senate. And luckily it didn't make it through the Senate. But as it started, as soon as we heard about it, we got on top of it. We used social media, also an application called Muster, which I believe Virginia used as well. Someone else can chime in here if that was correct. And that was how we were able to get the information out to all of our members, all the opticians, even other states. So it was a very successful campaign. The legislators said that they had never realized there were so many opticians in Florida, and they heard us loud and clear because we were calling them, writing them, faxing them, emailing them. They were getting bombarded with things about these bills. So having your lobbyists, having everyone come together, using social media, all the technology you can, that's kind of how we were able to defeat it. And basically the bill died in the Senate. So in order to pass, it had to have a House bill and a Senate bill, and it never made it through the Senate. So
Awesome. Thank you. Kris, do you want to, so one thing that Wes said that you guys hired a new lobbyist. I know Kris and I talked about lobbyists and what state society should kind of talk about with lobbyists. Kris, do you want to give some insight into what people should look for if they have a lobbyist, and like what is a lobbyist and what they do?
Right, right. Well, a lobbyist is basically your connection to the legislative leader. They're your mouthpiece. They know who's chairs each committee. They know the players. They're the inside, you know, that inside person you're essentially paying for. What you want to look for, obviously, in a lobbyist is, there's all kinds of lobbyists, first of all, but you want to look for a lobbyist that knows something about your profession. You know, you don't want to hire a gun lobbyist for, you know, a sunset bill in your state. So you can interview your lobbyist. You can figure out, okay, do you even know what an optician is? Are you familiar with, you know, at least healthcare professions? You know, do that kind of thing. And then you need to think about, what am I hiring you for? Am I hiring you for one case, for like one issue? Am I hiring you for just to keep an eye out for, you know, things popping up every once in a while during the session? You need to think about that as an association. And then a big thing that you need to think about is, what kind of resources do you have? You don't want to drain all of the association's resources for something that may never happen, or something that you can't fight either way. So you really need to have that close relationship with that lobbyist and trust them, because they're there to make money too. So they may say, yeah, 20 grand up front, we can beat this. But behind the scenes, you may have never really had a chance. So interview a couple lobbyists, find out, you know, do your homework and background.
yeah, and we had a great lobbyist. He was a former House member and Senate member. So, and he has a team available. So with that leadership and our executive director leadership and our board leadership, that's how we were able to do it. And plus all the, you know, 10,000 plus phone calls and emails sent, that really hit it home, so that it got the message across and we were successful.
I see some people asking in chat about muster, and it looks like muster was really helpful, but they were asking about the cost, and I'm not super familiar with it, but I think in the chat they talked about it, that it's a $2,000 yearly expense from what I'm reading here.
Yeah, George, I went ahead and answered that on so that it's posted to everyone, the question and the answer. It was apparently around 2,000 in Virginia and 4,000 in Florida, but there are different packages available depending on where you are.
Yeah, thank you. I remember when I was a kid, I'm a second generation optician, and my dad was involved in state societies. And years ago, there was a sunset up in Massachusetts, and they tell the story that they hired a lobbyist, and they were really worried because the lobbyist wasn't sitting with them. He wasn't near them. He was by the exit, like he was looking to leave really quickly. And Blair tells the story that as the session ended, he was in the exact right spot to shake everybody's hand as they left. And so having a good lobbyist is like that kind of thing. It's just amazing to have that kind of connection. And that's a quality lobbyist. So I always thought that was kind of fascinating. So the other thing is that, you know, Jim, so with Florida, they used a lot of social media. We kind of talked about that. And that's always the first thing. Whenever we do any kind of, when any of this stuff comes up, it really is on the responsibility of the state. OAA always kind of, and I think I'm correct in saying this, OAA kind of defaults to follow the state's leadership in this. And it's super important to have a good relationship and be proactive. So how can you be proactive? What are ways that you can be proactive? You know, one thing that we do in Massachusetts is we always send a representative to our state board. So we have good relationship with our state board. We have, do you have other suggestions, Wes, Kris, or Jim, about staying active, who to contact if something comes up, things like that?
If you're asking me, I will say what we do at ABO. I have a procedure that I go through with regard to things like this. So like in Florida, what I did was I found out who was on the joint committee, who were the speakers and the representatives, or the senators and the representatives, who were the chairs. And I put together a letter, and I put together a personal letter detailing my own story and why it was important to me that they hear what I had to say. And I've done that for sunsetting across the country, individual efforts to try to combine boards, and so on. So I send a letter to the representatives. I don't, you know, one of the questions that was asked in the chat was, or in the Q&A was, do you think that muster will take the place of a lobbyist? And my personal answer is no. I think that it's a way to get your voices heard by the masses of opticians that can respond. But then the bigger issue is you also need to have the personal touch, either through a lobbyist, which is great because they know how to manipulate, and I don't mean that badly, the system, they know how to address it. But then also your personal letters. Personal communication is still key. So I wrote personal letters to each one, addressing the concern that I saw and how they should handle it, addressing them correctly, giving them the respect that they deserve, writing a nicely worded letter to each individual. Then I went a step further, and this is what ABO does, is I flew down to Florida and I testified in front of the Senate. Florida, the way that we approached it there was, I think, very well done. You have we had a state board representative, the chair of the state licensing board testified. Then we had the association, which are the people that, so if you don't understand, the licensing board, their job is to protect the consumer. So we had the chair of that board testify on behalf of the consumer, not on behalf of the opticians. Then we had the lobbyist, the association testify with the lobbyists and so on with regard to protecting opticians. And then I testified with regard to the certification, the license, the education, and mine was my personal story with my son. And we kind of, by doing that, we hit every single aspect and presented a very united front and a very carefully orchestrated, because they only gave us a certain amount of time each with the number of things they had going on. So part of this is understanding how the legislature works and what timing you have to get it done. But that's kind of what we did in Florida. Did I miss anything, Wes, on I think that's kind of the approach that we went through, right? And Kris, sorry.
Yeah.
And I think Jim would have noticed early on, and I know Florida did as well, that the House was brought, the bill was brought in the House first, and the sponsor of the bill, I believe, may have been the chair of the committee that was overseeing it. So all of the focus was in the Senate, because you only have to stop the bill in one spot. You can stop it in the House, the Senate, or the executive. It only has to stop in one. It's got to pass all three of those. So think they knew early on that the House was kind of a lost cause, but if they can stop it in the Senate, which they did, that's where they focused their efforts. They didn't waste any time in the House. So what Jim talked about early on is the first thing he does researching, okay, what's the landscape? Who brought the bill? Who's ahead of the committees? Where can we pick our battle?
And Jim, you're with the ABO, so ABO is involved in state stuff like this. You want to talk to that a little bit more?
Yeah, so I don't know that it's necessarily kosher that we do it, but I have kind of, the only reason why I'm here is to protect opticians. That's why I took on the responsibility that I did. So part of what I asked for permission to do once we got our house in order was to start going out and protecting opticians across the country and testifying and addressing it. So what ABO has done is they have given me the privilege and the liberty to travel as needed. So George, you've seen me at your meetings in Massachusetts many times. I've been to Florida whenever I can, whenever they have theirs in person and I can get there. I have flown to Washington State to testify with their board or with their health department. Nevada, met with them many times in getting them up to speed with our exams. I literally fly around to wherever there's a need for opticians to be protected. Every state does what's called sunsetting, and I think we ought to address that because George, you talked about Florida. Florida had this, it's on the screen here. It's called Florida Sunset Bills right here. The Florida Sunset Bills, what that is, sunsetting means that they use sunshine for shining the light on what boards do, legislatures and so on. And then they use sunsetting. And what the sunsetting means is that every state has asked that every regulatory board determine its need, and that the boards figure out, are they really relevant? And legislature should scrutinize every board to make sure that they're relevant. And so that's what's been going on. It's called sunsetting. Is it time to get rid of it? Is it time to just sunset it, send it off into the sunset and kill it? That's literally what it means. So opticianry is being put on sunset watch all the time in different states. If you hear that in your state, it's time to step up and address it immediately, alert everyone. And with your permission, George, I'm going to roll up to that so they see it. OAA has come up with this plan right here, and I'll let you all talk to it. ABO's also willing to be involved in anything along these lines as well. But basically, if you hear a sunset in your state that involves anything related to opticianry, you've got to let somebody know because we can't step in and help unless we know. But I've been to sunset in Ohio, Massachusetts, Florida, Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, Ohio, if I didn't mention it, Nevada, Washington, Arizona, California. The one that nobody ever told us about was Texas, and they got rid of it because nobody alerted. I didn't even know that it was on the radar screen. But if you alert, then we can take prompt action. And I think if you watch what happened in Florida with the muster campaign, with the association doing what it needed to do, with us flying in, and it was like the day after OAA was done, I flew home and I flipped around and flew right back down the next day. But if you do that, you can protect your license. And right now that's critical. So that's a little bit about what sunsetting is. Sorry to go off on a tangent. There are a lot of questions, and I'll answer some. I'm going to answer some by typing, but George, I'll hand it back to you. And then if we need to do some of the question and answer, we can go through those too.
Yeah, absolutely. I know one of the questions that came up was, what's the future of Florida? And I don't know if Wes had stepped away, but do you know that? Any news on what's going on future-wise with Florida?
I don't know that there's anything. There's always a chance, but I don't believe it'll come back up on the sunset this year. But Dee's on here, and if she posts something, I'll jump in and she put it in the chat or privately or whatever, and I'll throw it out there. I haven't heard of any rumors yet on 2021 legislative efforts. I do know the only one I'm aware of is right now Kentucky has one posted because Kentucky can't afford to pay for the cost of the board that they have, and they wanted to raise their fees, but it's dying in the House. It can't get through the State House and Senate. So I don't know what's going to happen there if they can't make their pay. And then, Wes, I'll let you answer the Florida since you just threw it up there. Sorry about that. I should have asked you to answer that. Sorry.
He's back.
You were gone. To my defense, you had disappeared for a second. So go ahead and answer what's going on.
One thing that's great about virtual meetings is you can just pop on and off.
Basically for Florida, right in there.
Go ahead.
Yeah, there's no right now regarding opticianry licensure for this year. So hopefully it stays that way.
One thing I thought, like I said, we talked about that was interesting was you reached out to your membership through Muster. Did you reach out to anybody else like ODs or ophthalmologists to see where they stood?
Did I or did Florida?
Well, West.
Florida?
Yeah, Florida.
Most of the time they don't, OD and ophthalmologists don't like to get in other professions stuff, but every now and then they will if it can benefit them, they will, or if they're forced to. They didn't know for or against.
And Kris, am I remembering, and correct me if I'm wrong, was it Virginia that actually, so one thing that I've heard is that when one of these things come up, you should contact the other states, the other associations, your ODs, the other people in the professions, to see where they stand on it, to see if they have support or not support. Am I right, Kris, that they did that in Virginia, or am I misremembering?
Most likely. I mean, that's the whole point of leadership, when something like this comes up in Florida, it's going to come up in another state. The sunsets happen everywhere. So that's the job of OAA and the job of leadership.
Yeah. All right. Well, so let's see. So let's go through some questions here and see if there's any questions we need to answer.
I'm answering some in the type so that we can get through them.
Okay.
And then we can run through some of these if you want.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah. Go through some of them, Jim. Go ahead.
I was just going to respond. One of them was that D from the POF indicated that they did reach out to ODs. They said they didn't want to get involved. In Virginia, they reached out to everyone they could possibly find to get any assistance as possible. We probably could roll to Virginia on the share screen so people can see that. What I do know a little bit about what happened there, which was we did use Muster. Sorry, trying to get over there and it's not moving on. Give me a second on the screen. I don't know what's just happened. Technical glitches. So we did get to Muster in Virginia, but then we also had letter writing. I wrote letters to each one of the representatives, just like I said in Florida. Sent those out to everyone, had direct communications with the association to find out how we could help. And then I do know that there was money contributed by different organizations. NAO and OAA both contributed money to the state of Virginia. If I'm not mistaken, they both did. And worked very hard to try to address the issue and to shut it down quickly, because if you're decisive, you get there quickly to the people that are making the decision and they realize that this is a sensitive subject. then they'll shut it down. They won't go after you. If you don't, then you'll be like the natural gas mechanics, because that was the other one in Virginia that was on the chopping block. And I don't think they had a very good lobbying group. And if I'm not mistaken, they got deregulated because, and yes, that's where opticians were. Opticians were dumped in with natural gas mechanics in a bill to see whether we should be deregulated. So it can happen that quick, and you have to be ready to address it. And the quicker you address it, the cleaner you address it, the more pointedly you address it, the better off you'll be.
And it was really important in Virginia, if I remember, that everyone was listening to the Virginia leaders at the time. During that massive email, phone call, letter writing campaign, behind the scenes, their lobbyist was working with the chair. And then at one point he said, okay, just stop it and we'll work with you guys and get this squashed. Just settle down. You guys are hurt. And everyone listened. And the association in Virginia said, all right, we're going to call off the dogs. We're working together now. And they listened and they got everything squashed. So it's important to be coordinated, essentially. Don't just go in there guns a-blazing unless it's a coordinated effort, because it can backfire. But in Virginia, everything worked as it should have.
So there were two comments, one targeted toward Virginia and one targeted toward Florida. The Virginia is that the person that helped shut down the sunsetting effort lost their election. So Virginia needs to be on the watch for any type of event. And if you're in Virginia or know someone there, make sure you keep in mind the things here that I've highlighted about contacting OAA and ABO NCLE. Reach out to us so that we can help you ASAP on that. The other one was in Florida, and the question was, do we know who's behind the effort to sunset opticianry licensure in Florida? Who will benefit from the sunset? Can we take proactive steps to nip it in the bud? The answer is basically the governor and the entire legislature, because Florida is really big on scrutinizing things to make sure that you're sunsetting things that aren't necessary. D indicated that they're watching it. There doesn't appear to be a trigger this year. It's not in the bill that was put out there for sunsetting for this year. The reality is it's an ongoing issue. It's not really that it's being targeted by any one individual, at least this time around. But it's just that there's an ongoing question of, hey, is there a need for this? How do you stop it? You're proactive. Have a strong association. Support your association. Support your board if you have one. Support OAA. And I'm not putting a plug out there, but understand that when you do membership to OAA, to Massachusetts, or to ABO NCLE, your money goes to protecting your license. So like when I'm flying everywhere, if ABO doesn't have any renewals and we don't have any ability to do that, I can't fly in and testify. Same thing with OAA. If they don't have support, or if Massachusetts doesn't have support, you don't have people sitting there listening to the board and going, wait a minute, we might want to call Jim because they're getting ready to do a sunset. You have to have boots on the ground, and that costs money. That does lead into a question that I thought we might want to address here. Arlen talked about expenses, and he talked about ODs spending over 1% of their annual salary for annual dues, plus fundraisers and other things that they do that then go to lobbyists to protect ODs. And everybody on this call, like them or not, and most of you should like them because a lot of them are your employers, optometrists are ridiculously strong in their lobby group. I think opticianry should learn from them because they do an incredible job. They don't look at, and I'll just tell you in Kentucky, for example, they don't look at their investment in their association as a, should I do it this year? They look at it as a, wow, I need to invest in my association because my association has given me so much control, so much power. Our lobbyist is one of the top, she retired, for optometry. She was one of the top lobbyists in the state because of how strong she was going after it. Opticianry should learn from that. We need to, I know that, money is tight, but if you want to protect your license, remember where your license is protected. The Opticians Association of Massachusetts, the Opticians Association of Kentucky, the Ohio Association of Opticianry, that's where your protection is. Florida, obviously, I wasn't trying to leave them out. You should be supporting your state associations, and I don't think that opticians do enough. One of the questions that was asked, and I'm spinning two of his together. One was about the amount of money that you need to do. The other one was, he just got off my other call where I was talking about the need for boards to do audits and reviews and protecting themselves, making sure they're not being stolen from. And then he says, and then you say, go hire a lobbyist. Yeah, I know it's a lot of money, but the reality is lobbying does cost a lot, and you've got to make sure that you're ready to go. My recommendation is that you really need to sit down as a board and figure out your two biggest expenses should be the protection of your finances, which is the audit and review. And the second one is the lobbying, because without lobbying, you won't exist. So, you need to get education out, and you need to make sure that you're protecting opticians and you have a good time and dinners and so on with your state board. But at the end of the day, the first expense has to be to protect your assets, and the second one has to be to make sure there's a need for you to have assets. So you need to sit down and really carefully budget lobbying expense and your finances, and then auditing to make sure your money is being protected. So I think you need to talk about in your state, how much are you charging dues? And what are those dues going for? And you should be prepared at your annual meeting with your membership to say, look, guys, your membership dues are $185 a year. We used $105 per year. I'm making all this up. $105 per year for each one of you to get a lobbyist in place. Then we used $30 per year for each one of you to have a review done every year. This is where we're spending our money. You need to have an open book to answer questions from your membership so that they trust you. And then you need to spend the money wisely so that you can protect your organization. I know there's some other ones in here from Arlen. I'm going to try to read through those. I may answer some of them through typing. So go ahead. Sorry, George.
No, you're perfectly fine. One thing I think is interesting is we all talk about investing money. And most of us who generally go to OA leadership are already involved in our states. But there's probably some people, because we've gone virtual, that may not be involved in your state. And I would say that's hugely important too. If you're interested in this stuff and you love your profession like we do, you're passionate about it, and you want to protect it, one of the best things you can invest is your time, because there's never enough bodies. We all have full-time jobs, and one of the challenges that we have is getting to those meetings, putting somebody in that room just to be an ear out, checking those emails, looking at that stuff to see this stuff come up. So I think not only do you have to invest money, but we have to invest time. And that's something really important to think about. And some way you can get involved pretty easily, not even on the board. If you're from Massachusetts, for example, and you want to help us with this, you don't have to be a director. You can say, hey, I want to help you, and then help us look the stuff up. Or be a person at a director's meeting or a licensing board meeting. And those are all simple ways that you can get involved. So just something to think about as well.
And
So
when
staying
an
involved.
association has resources, They're the ones passing the bills. You're not on the defense, you know, you're not reactive, you know, you're increasing your scope. That's what optometry does. Once they have those resources, they don't worry about just fighting stuff. They're proactive. They're, you know, they're passing bills, increasing scope, and changing their profession for the better. And that's what I think opticians can strive for. And in some places we are. It's not like we're not, but that's definitely a model to step towards.
Yeah. And I think, as Dibby says, the needle's moving little by little. We're definitely moving the needle, and certainly these meetings help. So I'm really excited. That's why I'm part of what I am. So that's why all of us do what we do. Do we want to talk about a different a different situation? You want to talk about board consolidation in Ohio a little bit? That's a difference. We talked about two sunsets. Let's talk about Ohio for a second, because I think that one's kind of a fascinating one.
Yeah, so I think that was the second time that was tried in Ohio too. And similar to the other instances, they hired a lobbyist. They attended and contributed to fundraisers for state reps. They got out the message. They literally did about everything you were supposed to do, and they still lost. But there was a silver lining. They lost, but looking back, many of the opticians in Ohio told us that it was one of the best things that actually happened to them. Not necessarily for the resources that were drained from the association in the fight, but they were consolidated with the optometrist on the board, 4-2. So 4 optometrists, 2 opticians, I believe. But now they had a bigger voice. Now they said when they went to these committees or on this board, when they would speak, people would listen. That they were with the optometrists, they took opticians seriously, and in the end, it was one of the best things to actually happen for opticians in Ohio.
Yeah, I thought that was fascinating. That's the opinion. You guys hear me right? I thought that was fascinating that that's what happened. They kind of lost, but they won somewhat.
And the only thing I think they regretted as an association was all the resources they spent on something that actually would have made them a little bit better had they known.
Yeah, the one thing, the caveat to Ohio, and I was there to testify there as well, and I was disappointed in what happened, but you have a representative on the board there, Tom Breakout, who's also heavily involved with OAA. His personality has assisted in protecting the opticians because the optometrists on the board have realized his competency and his capability, and they've kind of said, you know what, we're going to be fine with you making the decision. So the one thing I would say to that is the specific people that we push to be on boards makes a big difference as well. So if a legislature sees backroom dealing and things going on where it's not kosher or it's not being run correctly, I've seen that those boards or those legislatures will start to scrutinize and look into, do we deregulate or do we take the authority back? So remember, who you put on the board has a big impact on how you will be handled or how you will be accepted. And I know some of you don't have the ability to do that. It goes through the governor's office. But state associations sometimes have a very big role with the governor's office to say, hey, how about this guy? Or how about this woman? And so keep that in mind. I think that Tom Breakout assisted tremendously in making sure opticians didn't lose control of their profession. They were doing the same thing in Nevada, and luckily we did stop. Actually, no, it may have been, yeah, it was Nevada. They were trying to combine the two. And my comment out there for anybody that's dealing with this is the story. You don't combine pharmacists with doctors. I know we're not pharmacists, but you give that example to the state license or to the state legislature, and you say, look, you would never want to have doctors scrutinizing whether pharmacists are doing their jobs. They're completely different jobs. So we use that example. It has worked pretty well anytime I have a let's consolidate boards issue. The only time it didn't was Ohio, and I was quite surprised given the, as Kris said, everything was done right. They just did what they were going to do. It was kind of an already done decision from what it looked like to me, and all they were doing was having us go through the procedures, and they really didn't care what anybody had to say.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead. You ready?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Yeah, there's one open question. Actually, there's two. The one is, can you speak to how critical retaining a lobbyist is in addition to the efforts of the boards and rank and file efforts versus the board and association group trying to do it alone? And the comment was, I've had several discussions with many states, and some say they can't afford a lobbyist. And the commentary, and I agree with it, is I don't think you can afford not to have the lobbyist. And I agree with that. This kind of goes back to the statement earlier of you need to make sure you understand that your single biggest responsibility as a state leader, state association, or any is you better protect the license. So either have someone that you can count on to lobby or figure out someone that can do it for you. The other thing I'll say is this. It's kind of like me. I go to Kentucky and I lobby for Kentucky all the time because I have a personal story. All of you have people that can help. Find somebody that'll donate their time. You fit someone for glasses that is an attorney or has a personal story, or maybe they're a lobbyist. Somebody out there has done it because almost all of them wear glasses. Figure out who that is and ask them if they can do a favor. Look, we don't have the money to do this, but could you help us? We really need some help. You know how important I am to opticianry. I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about George. If George has a guest come or a patient come into his office and he goes, look, I know you're a lobbyist, and I think our profession's under attack. Could you help? That's how this goes. So you guys should try to figure out some way to use your connections, ask for favors, ask for discounts. Never accept the lobbyist at the price they give you. Tell them that you don't have money. Then ask them what they can do. They'll negotiate with you, especially if you're a nonprofit. You wouldn't believe the number of times I've told people from ABO's perspective, I can't afford to pay that. Can you give me a better deal? Work it. You all have to.
Well, I see we're running out of time here.
Yeah.
So first, before we get out of here, but thank you guys. Jim, thank you very much for your insights. Kris, the same, and Wes. And any final question that anybody has that we didn't answer or that you guys wanted to say before we leave?
There was one about Connecticut, what's happening in Connecticut, and the thing I would say is that it's kind of brand new. We talked right before we started that everything in Connecticut's just kind of happening right now. OAA is aware of it, ABO and CLE is aware of it. We're looking at it, but we don't have a stance to take yet.
Yeah. And if you guys need anything, obviously, if you want that document, you can have it. My email is my first initial G, last name Bourque, Bourque, 2020, because I'm a nerd, @gmail.com. And you guys can get whatever you need from me, or I'm happy to send that document out or reach out to any of us. So thank you very much.